We live in a very divided country right now, and bipartisanship is something you don't see very often. But recently, there was a bipartisan bill that whoever writes Joe Biden's cue cards had him veto after the House and Senate both passed the bill that was supposed to ban ESG from being a consideration in how the money that is invested for all the pensions and retirement funds and Social Security, how that money cannot go towards companies based on ESG. So there goes that. Now, I've been talking about ESG a lot on this channel from the very beginning. It's something that kind of triggered me when I first learned about it because I knew what a disaster it would be. So I want to show you some clips from a hearing that they had down in Texas back in December of 2022, and you'll get a very good idea of what ESG is doing to these companies and to our retirement pensions. Now, take a second to go ahead and like and subscribe. I first learned about ESG through my college courses, and the first few videos that I posted on this subject are actual assignments that I had for classes. And don't worry, I got really good grades on those. And thanks for liking those if you did. Just so you know what ESG is, it stands again for environmental, social, and governance. And this is a new scoring system brought to you by the World Economic Forum in 2020 that investment companies are looking at to decide who to invest in. A company's ESG scores comes from how much it actually gives back to nonprofits. The basic concept of an ESG score is that it shows how much a company invests in the world around them and the society around them. Are they given to environmental causes to help the environment around them, which they are no doubtedly endangering or damaging? And are they giving to the social causes? Are they donating to organizations like BLM? Or are they a non-governmental organization who helps the government in, censoring or fighting against misinformation, things like that? And I just want to show you a quick clip just to illustrate this point, and you'll see what I mean afterwards.
Conferences in recent years has been the rapid growth of ESG investing. We talk a lot about the regulation, the reporting, and the structuring, but we rarely ask the question of why the investors are increasingly focused on this.
I think there are several things that are driving the interest in ESG, and some of those are the legacy reasons that investors may have been interested in ESG. Notably, oftentimes they still want to align their value system with their investment portfolio. So we continue to see interest in exclusionary activity where a particular fund might want to exclude certain kinds of assets. The traditional ones are things like tobacco and firearms.
Companies are more worried about the virtue of what they're investing in rather than the monetary benefit. And this is what Klaus Schwab wants. He thinks we should look at companies based on the ESG and not on GDP, not how much they're taking in, how much they're actually growing. And with ESG, a company isn't going to be as profitable because they're giving a considerable amount of that profit to these nonprofits, which these nonprofits can be used to subvert your democratic voice. And these nonprofits are the ones who work behind the scenes with the government to try to implement their political agendas. So at the end, she mentioned tobacco and firearms. If your idea of helping your community was to start a nonprofit that taught children about firearms and hunting, do you think that's going to get you a good ESG score? Probably not. And that's because these ESG scores are just subjective, and it really only matters if you're giving to the causes that the wider powers want you to be giving to. And that would be the climate and your social justice organizations and these NGOs, the non-governmental organizations that work to influence the government themselves. Now, the biggest problem with ESG scores is it really can mislead others on how well a company is doing. I want to show you a clip from a hearing in Texas back in December where a representative from BlackRock and we're talking to the Texas Senate. And let's hear about what kind of ESG score FTX had compared to ExxonMobil.
The cheating.
Well, the governance. I mean, I think it's hard to cut out governance when you're looking at directors and management.
I think that's great, but I earlier brought up FTX, who on their governance part of scoring got a higher scoring mark than ExxonMobil. They were doing their finances on Quicken Books. They literally did not have a CPA on staff. They had a 2-member board. Hopefully people are going to go to jail. It will be the largest fraudulent action probably in the history of the United States of America. And they got a higher governance score than ExxonMobil.
That was not an ISS score, Senator. So
I know, but it's out there.
Right.
If it's scored like that.
Right.
If you don't remember FTX, that's that crypto company run by this guy, Sam Bankman-Fried, who pretty much just ran a big old Ponzi scheme and donated a bunch of money to Democrats and a couple of Republicans who like the Democrats. And it has turned out to be a huge deal, and hopefully he'll be going to prison. But let's talk about... But now I want to shift gears and talk about climate. Now, I want to talk about Climate Action 100, and this is a great example of how these investors are using your money, your retirement savings and pensions to invest in political action. And it's quite clear if we look at the website here, right on the front page, what their mission is. It says it right here. Climate Action 100 Plus is an investor-led initiative to ensure the world's largest corporate greenhouse gas emitters take necessary action on climate change. Now let's listen as the senator from Texas talks to the BlackRock representative about Climate Action 100.
It's about Climate Action 100. Tell us what's Climate Action 100? Who is that? What is that?
Sure, sir. So Climate Action 100 is an investor initiative that looks at the world's largest emitters to consider like climate change issues.
Do you recognize the document on the screen in front of you? I can tell you it's the sign-on statement from early January of 2000 for Climate Action 100.
I can barely make it out. I'm sorry, at my age, my eyesight is not what it used to be. Okay, thank you.
I'll represent to you that this, again, is the sign-on statement from January of early on of Climate Action 100. And the first page of this document lays out BlackRock's commitment as a signatory to Climate Action 100. So let me ask you this. Is the purpose of Climate Action 100 for BlackRock and others to secure commitments from companies to take actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions consistent with the Paris Agreement? Is that your understanding?
Sir, we participate in Climate Action 100 to engage in dialogue with other participants, market participants, governments, so that we understand issues that are relevant to our clients.
So is part of your pledge to Climate Action 100 to secure commitments from companies that you invest in to take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions consistent with the Paris Agreement?
Sir, when we engage with companies, we engage independently in accordance with our global stewardship guidelines and to understand, from their perspective, understand material risks and opportunities so that we can produce the best performance we can for our clients.
So when BlackRock joins a group and officially signs a statement that says we are going to secure commitments from companies to take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions consistent with the Paris Agreement, is that not true?
Sir, I do believe in the production. You also received the letter that we signed, making it clear with respect to Climate Action 100 that we act independently in accordance with our own fiduciary principles and guidelines, and that is what we do. We are part of this organization to engage in dialogue on issues important to our clients, but we are independent in our actions with respect to our stewardship.
So even though you joined this group and you pledged, BlackRock pledged, to secure commitments from companies to take actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions consistent with the Paris Agreement, you're saying that's not what BlackRock's doing?
I want to put the context of this language that you have here.
Well, they're not our words. BlackRock signed it. I didn't write it.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, but we also sent a letter that made it very clear how we view our engagement with respect to climate action.
Well, the letter contradicted this statement and dozens of others. That's what we're trying to get to the bottom of.
The letter?
Yes.
The letter made it clear that we are fiduciary investors on behalf of clients, and we do not make any commitments or pledges with our clients' money. They make commitments. We do not make commitments with our clients' money.
Go ahead and down in the comments, let me know how many pensioners of you out there have gotten a call from your investment companies asking where you want your money to be invested. So State Street is another investing company that Texas uses, and the lady that they're going to be talking to is the same lady from the first clip that I showed. And she's going to be getting grilled on why State Street voted against oil projects in Texas and energy projects in Texas. If they're supposed to be looking out for the better good of Texans, why are they hurting Texas business? Well, let's listen.
Kelly, I've got to read this to you. On pages 16 to 17 of ISS proxy voting guidelines for 2022, ISS states that for companies that are on the Climate Action 100 Plus focus group list, ISS will generally vote against relevant directors if the company does not implement, in quotes, appropriate greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that must increase over time. That does not sound like an agnostic position by ISS.
As I had indicated earlier, Senator Betancourt, our policy is arrived at through annual surveys in the marketplace, investors, companies, other stakeholders. And the survey direction is to be more focused on the high emitting companies. And that's why you see that reflected in that policy.
Okay, well, but that means this is not agnostic, okay? Let me read it to you again. Okay, let me read this to you again. I want everyone to hear this, okay? On pages 16 and 17 of ISS's proxy voting guidelines for 2022, ISS states that for companies that are on the Climate Action 100 Plus focus group list, ISS will, quote, generally vote against, unquote, relevant directors if the company does not implement, quote, appropriate, in parentheses, greenhouse emission reduction targets that must, quote, increase over time, unquote. How is this an agnostic policy? Because it's one thing to say you've got a fiduciary responsibility, but again, let me read this. If the company does not implement appropriate greenhouse emission reduction targets, that must increase over time.
Again, the benchmark policy is developed with market input. It reflects the marketplace. From our perspective, as I said, ISS develops our policies and our process based on what we hear from the
This is an ISS
marketplace.
recommendation. This isn't you having apologized for not talking to the employee retirement system and understanding that they live in Texas and therefore Texas Energy. This is a default policy by ISS.
It is our benchmark policy, and if a client chooses to utilize our benchmark policy, they understand that that is the position.
Okay, well, that means the benchmark policy is not agnostic. This is not an agnostic statement. This is an activist statement. It is by any measurement. I understand. You wish to disagree?
Again, I just tell you, we are working within the marketplace, and we are client-focused, sir.
I understand you're working in the marketplace, but this is not an agnostic statement. I will read it one last time, give you one last time to answer this question. If the company does not implement appropriate greenhouse emission reduction targets that must increase over time, ISS will generally vote against relevant directors. That's not an agnostic statement.
It is a statement within our benchmark policy. I indicated ISS was agnostic. That benchmark policy is a reflection of the marketplace, sir.
But that's ISS's recommendation. So it's not just, it's your company's recommendation in black and white on pages 16, 17 of your proxy voting guide.
It is correct. It is an ISS recommendation, sir. But
Boy,
the benchmark
I'm really
policy.
disappointed in that, okay? I'm disappointed that somebody would come and say that this is agnostic, because it's not. It's activist, specifically against, in what ISS obviously is targeting, appropriate greenhouse emission reduction targets that must increase over time.
We have other policies that don't offer that, sir, and it's the choice to the
But
investors.
this is the policy you're defaulting to. It's not agnostic. It's a default activist statement in black and white. So, I mean, I'll give you a chance to retract the agnostic statement, because it's not. You're not agnostic. It's clearly evident in writing in your proxy statement. Am I missing it?
Again, I believe the company is agnostic. I think the policy is a reflection of the marketplace.
The policy is the company's policy. There's no differentiation between the company and the policy if it's on page 16, 17 of your proxy voting guidelines. There isn't. You could say there is, but there's not, because it's not the ERS policy. It's not the TRS policy, which, by the way, Mr. Chairman, I do want to correct something I said. The TRS issue was not an energy issue. It was another issue that was a proxy vote on. See, if I'm saying something, I correct it. Why can't you? This is not an agnostic statement. This is ISS's proxy voting guidelines for 2022. Why can't you correct it? It's not, the company's not agnostic when it says ISS will generally vote against relevant directors if the company does not implement appropriate greenhouse gas emission reduction targets that must increase over time.
I believe it's a difference of opinion, sir.
There's no difference of opinion, because this is all the ISS opinion. It's all on page 16. And your opinion that the company is agnostic. You work for the company. Yeah, sorry to say, I have to strongly disagree, because this is your statement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Senator Betancourt. Mr.
Now, this hearing was back in December of 2022, and it didn't get a lot of coverage. I didn't hear much about it, and there's a lot of good information that was revealed in that hearing. So I recommend anybody, if you have 2.5 hours to kill, just go ahead and click that link down below and you can watch it for yourself. But I think that what I showed you here is very representative of what I've been saying about ESGs and why ESGs are very detrimental to our society and to our country. So please, with everything you got, resist ESGs and let it be known that you do not support ESG. So thank you for watching this. If you got something out of it, please hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed yet, please go ahead and subscribe and help us grow this channel and get the truth out to more people. Until next time, peace be with you.